Hassan and Fikry, thank you so much for joining us here today for this interview. Such an honor and a pleasure. First of all, I guess congratulations on being ranked top 3 in both the IRO and corporate category in the EMEA 2020 awards. And in fact, also achieving a top 2 rank in the sector for the complete survey of the emerging EMEA executive team. So tell me, how important are these awards to you?
Thank you very much, Emeni. Thank you for taking the time for this interview. Actually, it's quite important for me, this award, and the fact that I was actually nominated from the first place. To me, being relatively a new IR, IR professional, just 2 years into the job, I think that, well, when you get feedback either from management or from investors, it's good. But when it's actually in a formal manner and held by either institutional investors or the IR association, that says a lot. It proves that I did my job relatively well. I was actually very skeptical on the job when I first started it, because I knew that I knew the company really well, but I didn't know if I'm gonna be a good IR professional at the end of the day. And throughout the 2 years, I got positive feedback, whether it's from investors, whether it's from management, whether it's from analysts. But at the end of the day that I got that email from II saying that congratulations, you've ranked somewhere, this was the certificate that everything that people have been telling me in the past 2 years is the truth. It's not just people telling me good job, you're doing well, continue what you're doing. It is the actual certificate, from 2 top entities, I guess. So. And it really pushed me forward into, continuing and understanding that I actually have strength in this, and I'm not doing this job just because the company needs it. It is also important for me, not just on the Egypt level or the national level, but I think it's important for me because I realized that I can actually, go somewhere or reach beyond Egypt, especially on ranking second in terms of healthcare. In the region. So I'm actually, I'm delighted. I'm very happy. And yeah.
Fantastic. Very well deserved. And actually on that note, you mentioned just the sector being the largest private hospital group. Your sector is obviously currently under a lot of pressure. And how has your IR engagement then changed since the pandemic?
When the pandemic hit, everything changed in IR, and that was a time of, to me, it was either make it or break it. When you look at it at the market, the local market, how the local market, EGX, the investors were responding to Egyptian companies in general, and how investors in general were responding to, to equity investments in general in the pandemic. So I knew that it was either make it or break it during that time. And then the second part was I started having more and more conversations with my investors. So instead of speaking to my investors every month or 2 months or whatever, I started speaking to the important investors, or actually all investors, on a weekly basis, for example. I went beyond just the financial disclosure and the strategic disclosure. I started going into giving them day-to-day feedback of what we're doing. Giving them confidence of how we as a company are reacting to the pandemic. That's from one side. And then the other important thing that I did, giving investors information on how Egypt is responding to the pandemic, what's happening on ground, because that is very important. Honestly, it wasn't only to international investors, even local investors, local asset management, local research would call me not only to ask about, what is Cleopatra doing? How are you handling? What are the volumes? What are the financial outcomes? Blah, blah, blah. No, they used to call me and tell me what's happening. How many cases do we have today? How's the government responding? What is the occupancy rate across all hospitals? What do you think will happen next month? What do you think will happen in the second wave? What do you think will happen to the first wave? So, I was actually, I was borderline, spokesman for the Ministry of Health to the market. And that was very, 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 very important. That kind of knowledge was very important, that kind of feedback was very important during the pandemic. It's not only about the company, it's about the market, it's about Egypt, it's about how the healthcare market is evolving, it's about what's going to happen to the pandemic, what are the expectations. Obviously, there were a lot of question marks up until now. No one can answer when this pandemic can end, right? But because you are in the industry, because you can see on ground what can happen, you can give comfort, you can give information that will make it easier to the investor to anticipate or to understand what are the risks and what is the upside and what is the downside of investing in a healthcare company during a pandemic. I think what also made it very easy for me is because at the end of the day, I'm not only an IR director, but I'm also the corporate strategy director. So what I'm executing in the company, I can talk about very easily. I don't have to go back to the CEO. I don't have to go back to anyone in the company and tell them what's happening. Please explain to me because the investors are asking. No, they get it from me firsthand because the decisions are either made, I wouldn't say by me, but I'm on the decision table. So once I get out of this meeting, I can talk to investors. There is no filtration process between the executives and the investors. So that also made it a lot easier because I'm on ground doing the actual work.
In the Emerging EMEA Executive Team Survey, you've also ranked second in your sector in the ESG category. Guide us through a little bit about what you're currently doing with regards to ESG integration into your communication and overall strategy.
Well, it's pretty straightforward. I think that globally there is a lot of focus on ESG from investors. I think ESG is as important. Disclosing ESG metrics, talking about ESG, having an ESG strategy by itself is as important as your financial performance to institutional investors. So, if once you realize that as a company, once you realize that as an IR professional, you realize that you need to give it attention in terms of disclosure, in terms of reporting, as much as you give, your quarterly financials. So we had a little bit of an advantage because we've been working on ESG for quite a long time right now. With even our major shareholders, even before we went IPO. So ESG has always been on the table. The only thing that I think evolved was having not only tracking ESG matrices, but also reporting that. So we've been doing sustainability reports for the past 2 years. And I think this gives better access to a lot of institutional investors who put ESG as very important before they make the decision on investing in any company. The fact that we are in healthcare makes it a little bit easier, at the same time tricky, because our services really touch base on everything in ESG. So it is easier in terms of, let's say, reporting or being hitting the right targets, but at the same time it's tricky because you have to focus on a lot of factors. So I think it's quite important. It is evolving. I think in the next 1 to 5 years it's going to be even more important. We started with just reporting a template. Now we have a complete sustainability report. I think that next year definitely it's going to be bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And the more we report it, the more we focus on it, and vice versa.
Very good. You've only joined the IR function a couple of years ago. What attracted you to the role? And if you consider somebody who is thinking about joining an IR function or becoming an IR, what are your top tips?
I think it's very interesting of how I joined and why I joined. I think that I was never, I never thought of IR as being my profession. I have a background. I have a very diverse background when it comes to experience. So I have a little bit of finance, a little bit of strategy, a little bit of commercial and operations. And most of my career has been around healthcare management. So I have the right mix when it comes to being a relative joker in any institution, right? And when we went IPO, before we went IPO, I actually did most of the work related to IR before joining IPO, because at that time, we didn't have an IR professional. Senior management, the CEO, the chairman looked at me and they're like, no one else can do this job but you. We can get another IR professional from outside the industry, from outside the company, but at the end of the day, they will know the IR function or the IR toolkit, but they won't know the company, they won't know the industry, and so on. The industry, you really don't have the IR toolkit, but we believe you can understand it relatively well. So I became very interested. At the beginning, I was kind of scared. I don't know investor names. I don't know who's an important investor, who's not, but I understand the fundamentals of what an IR guy needs to do. At the same time, I was also scared. I didn't want, to take a lot from my day-to-day job. So I had to find the right balance. I talked to a lot of professionals in the industry. I think that a lot of people help me, whether they're analysts in research, whether they're investors, obviously my top management, but I think people within this industry in Egypt are very helpful. There is a certain toolkit that you will need to learn it, you'll be good. That's exactly what happened. I'll always be interested in IR. I guess that, I always want to, I still want to continue doing that beside my executive role in the company. That professional world is very, 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 very interesting. With very important conferences. At least there are 3 or 4 international conferences that we attend to. The connections and the access to that kind of investors you would never see them. You'd never meet such minds and such brains, no matter what you do in your company, unless you are the IR guy.
Addressing corporate governance is obviously also part of the IR building blocks, if you like. How is Cleopatra Hospitals dealing with that, and how do you incorporate that into your communication and engagement?
I think with corporate governance, it's very important for us in terms of not only what the company does in terms of corporate governance to be attractive enough for investors, but I think also what the market here or how the regulators are supporting you in corporate governance. So I think EGX really helps us in having the right corporate governance, whether it's with disclosure, not only disclosure requirements, but also disclosing an actual corporate governance report. That is something that EGX has been pushing for the past few years, and now it is something that we have to report every year. To us, having the right corporate governance framework is what differentiates us between a normal public company or a normal private company and a listed company that can attract institutional investors. At the end of the day, corporate governance is about transparency. It's about having the right structure of reporting, having the right, having a board, an independent board, and so on. So I guess corporate governance is very important, and it will always be, and that is what differentiates an attractive company to institutional investors versus just versus a private company.
Thank you. So with that, we move on to the quick round questions. So we got to know Hassan Fikry a little bit more on the professional side. We would like to identify some of your personal preference, if that's okay. First of all, name a historical figure you would like to meet, and what question would you ask him or her?
I would want to meet whoever built the pyramids, whether it's probably Khufu, for all we know. And I'll just ask him one question: how did you build it? That's it.
Very good. Who's your favorite singer or band?
That's I don't have a straightforward answer for that, because I listen to all types of music, music, from from all genres, and I have a favorite artist in all types of music. But I think that if I want to name someone, favorite band, I think The Doors.
Very good. Which quote from a movie do you use in your daily life?
It's not really a quote, it's a whole speech. So there is a movie called Any Given Sunday, and Al Pacino, goes to his team and gives them this, 10-minute speech on. I think there's this sentence that he says that life is all about all those inches, right? And then, every inch basically counts, and the inch will either make you or break you. So I think this is the quote that I live by every day. So every little thing that you do will actually count, and it's what's going to differentiate from succeeding to failing. So life is all about those inches.
Very good. And the last question, which book did you read last?
Business Adventures.
Okay, very good.
Business Adventures.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, Hassan, for this interview. It was very interesting, very insightful. Really appreciate your time. All the best for this year. Keep up the good work, and hopefully we'll see you in person this year at the EMEA conference.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.